Welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. And in this episode, we talk about prestige, the perceived luxury around cigars. Welcome everybody to the Light 'em Up Lounge. My name is Reinhard Pohorec.
And I'm Christian Wohlrab.
Christian, I'll get busy pouring drinks. You get to work on the cigars, just to make sure we have something to drink and to smoke.
Let's do it. How are you doing, my friend?
Excellent, and I'll be much better in just a second when we get to light up and have a drink.
So today,
There we go.
thank you. We'll be talking about prestige and how it relates to cigars. So
How fitting that we pour a very old Grand Champagne Cognac from Frapin, VIP XO, aged in humid cellars, 100% Grand Champagne, distilled on the lees and aged at the estate. This is quite a nice pour.
quite a nice pour. All right. Well, let's get to it.
How fitting for the topic.
Well, we got a lot to cover today, Reinhard.
As always.
Now, you said it, prestige. Why is the cigar associated with prestige, in your opinion, being in the industry for some time? So, would be curious what your take is.
Well, I think in a lot of people's perception, cigars still to this day carry a certain luxurious feel around them. And people often associate cigars with the millionaire, the billionaire, the guy who made it, the guy who just finished a big deal and then he lights one up to celebrate. Or when you think about celebrities and sports people, particularly in the US, when you think about the team winning the Super Bowl or the NBA finals, and then the entire team gets to light up a cigar in the locker room still, and they all celebrate.
So you're saying it's more related to success, maybe even, than to exclusivity of the product?
Well, I think it's both, but it's what a lot of people think cigars to be nowadays. I don't necessarily think that's true. Well, obviously, you can always celebrate by lighting up a great cigar and enjoying a moment. But at the end of the day, cigars in and by themselves are a very humble, honest product. It's pure nature. You know, you take the fruits of Mother Nature, you put them together in a very humble, honest, and sincere way, and then you have a product which is it's an affordable luxury.
Speaking of...
A cigar is time, first and
Affordable.
foremost, for me, you know?
Speaking of affordable, though, I was in Copenhagen the other day and I went into a walk-in humidor, and immediately I saw, I think it was a Fuente Opus X Lost City for 740 Danish crowns, and I had to do the math, and it's like $120. So that certainly seems to me like quite exclusive. Obviously, not all cigars are that expensive. So how would you segment that? We have let's say the luxury cigars, and what else is there? Is every cigar that expensive?
Quite the opposite. Most people live somewhere around a $10 bracket. Obviously, we've gone up in price quite a bit over the last couple of years, but when you truly think about it, the majority of the market is cigars that are just under or just over $10, roughly. And then, of course, you get into the higher ranks of the $18 to $20 bracket. There's a few that sit just around that 25 mark, and then everything above goes into the real luxury or a quote-unquote luxury segment where maybe the price is just an afterthought for a lot of people. But just going back to that initial question of whether or not a cigar is luxury, for me a cigar is all about time. And in today's day and age, time is luxury, because it's the one thing that nobody really seems to have or seems to be able to afford, because we're just rushing from A to B. And here is a very humble product that allows you to sit down, have a conversation, or just reflect on what's happening in your life and take a break from reality for an hour, for 2 hours, whatever it might be. And that to me is the real value of the cigar. Now, obviously there's other people who want to show off and they want to flex and they want to show the ring of whatever they're smoking so they can show everybody else and their friends they've made it and they're able to afford a cigar above a certain price point. But for me, that's not truly what cigars are at their very core.
I want to get back to that aspect of timelessness. And I recall a book I read the other day. I forgot the author, Markowitz, I think. It's called The Meritocracy Trap. And it basically talks about the aspect of being busy as being a symbol for wealth. And in today's capitalist world, it feels like if you're not busy, then you're nobody. You know, everybody who's wealthy is so busy all the time. So one could say that taking a break to enjoy a cigar is quite the opposite, actually. So we might now look back into timelessness as something that maybe is not so present today anymore because of the daily madness that we're all in. So this might be a welcome break.
Christian, I think when you truly think about it, busy does not equal productive, and busy does not equal success. I believe that we live in a world where portraying to be busy just gives you an excuse to tell other people, I'm doing stuff, I'm getting there, I'm grinding, eventually you're going to be successful. But when you look at people with real wealth, they're not busy. You don't see them running around on their phone all the time. Usually these people are much calmer. They take time to reflect, read a book, sit down with their mentors, with their friends. I think it's more in the middle ranks where everybody's grinding and is super busy and running.
Yeah, I can see myself there.
And then once you get to a certain point, you're like, no, you know, take a step back. And oddly enough, in that whole setting, cigars are the antithesis to everything that's happening in the world, because it's just the acceleration that everybody is moving faster all the time. You take AI now, just taking all of that to a whole new level, and here we are, sitting back, lighting up a cigar, pouring a glass of cognac, and having a conversation.
Yeah, let's bring that back.
We need to bring that back.
But
I see that more and more, even with younger people, that one of the main reasons I think cigars have become truly popular again and are ever growing in their presence is because people need that more than ever. We need moments to sit back, reflect, take time for ourselves, take time for a great conversation, our friends, our family, and just leave the world outside.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, quite the segue actually to something I wrote down. Can we have a sip of
this in the meantime, please?
Come again?
Can we just have a sip of this? I'm sorry, but
sure, I already did, but you were busy talking.
Yeah.
It is quite nice. It is quite nice. Well, I hear we got another episode about pairings, so we'll get more into that at that time. Now, you were talking about young people smoking cigars, the industry growing a little bit, and indeed, in the pandemic, it did grow. So I looked at some of the data from the late 90s to 2020, and it is indeed a growing market, and we're talking about premium cigars, like low single digits.
Handmade,
so
premium
not
only.
crazy growth. And then in the pandemic, quite interestingly, because people spent more time at home, there was higher consumption. And in the forecasts previous to the pandemic, one of the main drivers for cigar growth was the opening of hotels, especially around the Middle East, the US, with cigar lounges where smoking is allowed. So this seems to continue, maybe now at a bit of a lower level, lower rate due to economics worldwide, tariffs, whatever, stuff like this. But I don't really see any, and maybe that's just my bubble, any young people, popular people, Hollywood stars smoking cigars. When I think cigars, I'm thinking Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is that just in my bubble, or where are those people?
There's a couple of things that you touched on, and I want to kind of dissect that a little bit. First, growth for the premium cigar ecosystem and industry comes from two different points. One, especially during the pandemic, and that might have slowed down a little bit, but it's still an important factor, is cigar enthusiasts, people who were already smoking cigars, were smoking way more during the pandemic because suddenly everybody was stuck at home, people were working from home, and you would sit outside, sit on the patio, on your balcony, in your garden, with the laptop open, on a Zoom meeting, having a cigar.
So
or multiple.
No prestige involved at all?
Not necessarily, no. And that's a good point, I think, especially in the US. Cigars are very base democratic. And with the influx of younger people and newer enthusiasts, we're getting even more away from the whole luxury and prestige setting, because it's just the everyday Joe. It's normal people who like to enjoy a cigar. Coming back to what we discussed earlier is, why do people even get into cigars? Because you want to take that moment for yourself, because you want something analog in a digitalized world. So there's the old cigar enthusiasts, and by old I mean previous cigar smokers, who suddenly enjoyed 3, 4, 5 cigars a week when it was probably 1 before that. The second factor is new cigar smokers. People who are just discovering the lifestyle, people who are just discovering that this is one of the most mythical, magical products that we have at our disposition, affordable luxury, where for $10, $15, $20, you get a couple hours worth of vacation and a break from reality. And that's super important. And we see a bit of both. I think that the aspect you mentioned about celebrities and why you don't really see many young celebrities enjoying cigars is not everybody is willing to show that through social media, because they might be worried about potential ripple effects or a backlash from the anti-smoking movement, or maybe people don't want to be perceived as, he's the rich kid, he's the big shot, the guy who can afford a cigar. Now, if you're a sports celebrity or if you're from Hollywood, then you probably don't really care. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but just take the quarterback Burrow and him openly showing that he enjoys cigars after a game.
Yeah.
So you do have that. Or take Michael Knowles, who's a very influential public speaker and public figure in the US, very vocal about politics. He has his own show, 1 million followers on Instagram, I believe. And he now has his own cigar brand. Mm-hmm. So you certainly find these people, but I think there's different dynamics between the US market and here in Europe, for example. A lot of people in power, a lot of politicians here in Europe enjoy cigars. None of them have the balls to show that in public because they're afraid of the backlash. and how it could affect their career.
So
which is very pathetic and truly a pity, because you should be vocal about that. And you should. This is a product for grown-up adults. This is not an addictive product. This is a choice that you make to enjoy an adult product, and then you shouldn't get any backlash for that.
I'm seeing maybe one more element here, and this might be the health reasons. Now, certainly health, longevity, those kind of things, proclaiming and living that healthy lifestyle is something that probably even the Hollywood stars are really much promoting. You don't want to be perceived as unhealthy, I guess, and it's a growing trend. Is that potentially limiting growth in that industry? Is that potentially holding people back and doing it? Or do you think it's actually two really different things?
I think so. I would rather argue you see that a lot in the spirits and wine industry, because alcohol consumption has gone down dramatically. And for the younger generation, people drink less or they're completely dry and don't enjoy alcohol at all. With cigars, I don't really see that, besides the fact that you can weigh the enjoyment of a cigar infrequently versus the positive effect that it brings to you in terms of relieving stress, giving you that moment of peace and quiet. And then, it's everybody's decision as to where do you find that balance
100%.
And how do you enjoy in moderation. And I'm all for enjoying in moderation, obviously, whether it comes to a drink, to a cigar, or really anything in life. But as a grown-up adult, you should be able to make those decisions for yourself.
You were speaking earlier about the US being a market, let's say, a region where cigars are a leisure product as well. So
Base democratic.
talk to me about the regional differences here. And I've heard you talk about this in the past, but I find it quite fascinating how people in Europe may perceive cigars very different to people in the US. And maybe let's also touch up on Latin America, Asia Pacific, Middle East, but let's take it one by one. So you're saying cigars in the US are, and we're generalizing here for sure,
Obviously.
Are they more prestigious viewed as they are in Europe?
In the US, you have a very mature cigar market, very educated consumers. You have a cigar culture that goes back centuries. And I think with that comes the realization and the understanding of the product that this is an honest, truthful, humble product and not necessarily just a luxury. And also you have a cigar culture that's very widespread geographically also and demographically, that if you drive into any small little town or a little village in the US, the chances of you finding a good tobacconist where you have a great or a decent selection at least of handmade premium cigars, most likely with a lounge adjacent, which works like a magnet for the local community where the people hang out, the mayor might be there and the lawyer and the working class people, the creative guy with his MacBook, they're all coming together at the cigar lounge. So it almost acts like a social glue for the community. You find that everywhere. And then of course you can go to the super high-end member clubs for the rich and the wealthy and the glitzy and the glamorous stuff. But cigars are really part of everyday life and communities all across the entire range.
All right, so prestige, let's say, is certainly reserved often to a small number of people, as it comes with a lot of investment, it's expensive, many prestigious things at least. So,
but let's be honest about
you get
that.
the range.
If you go to Starbucks and you buy a coffee for $7 or $8 every single day, here you have a cigar that you might enjoy every once in a while couple of weeks maybe, and you get a great cigar for $10,
I hear you.
roughly the same price as your Starbucks coffee, by all means.
I had the other day thought about buying 2 drinks at a bar that are like 15 to 20 US dollars each, let's say, Negroni, whatever, and you could just cut down, have one and have a cigar, or have one, have a tea or coffee and have one. So it's not like you're sacrificing much of any different experience.
And what you gain is the peace and quiet,
Peace
and
and
a
quiet.
wonderful moment that's memorable, meaningful, and very important.
And the cigar experience, that's something that can enhance and, does, for me, certainly, any experience with drinks, pairings, and so on. So just...
And also think about the doors that cigars can open for you. I mean, I've met the most interesting, the greatest people over cigars, having a conversation around cigars.
It does bring people together. I mean, every time I smoke a cigar, and I remember just last time in Amsterdam Pride, I smoke a cigar, some other guy, like across 2 boats on the opposite side, sees me smoke cigars, and he gets out his little cigar bag and he's showing to me, and then he came over, and a great guy from Mexico, and we had a smoke. So
and not to be opportunistic about it, but the doors it can open also for business are great, or just the greatest friendships that are forged over cigars. So there's so many layers to it, where you could find value in the enjoyment of a cigar, and it really doesn't matter how big or small your bank account is.
I hear you.
Back to the regional aspect, if you look at Europe, for example, still over here, cigars in general are much more expensive than they are in the US, especially when you think about the non-Cuban cigars.
What's like the average when you say like a premium hand rolled, a good cigar?
It depends on the market, because taxation for tobacco is so variable all across Europe. And you look at certain markets like the UK, where it just almost becomes prohibitively expensive to enjoy cigars because of the tax. On average, you're probably looking at a 25-30% price increase compared to the US when talking about non-Cuban cigars, which you could find in both markets. And that's just a rough estimation, but that's one aspect. And also, Europe always has a bit of that old European flair and elegance to it, right? And that also plays into the lifestyle and the areas or the settings and sceneries where cigars are enjoyed nowadays.
I see.
The other layer on top of that is it's getting really, really difficult to find places in Europe where you can still enjoy a cigar. So oftentimes you force people into the private member clubs, these little pockets where you're amongst yourselves and you find solitude and peace and quiet in enjoying cigars in an environment that will probably raise the entry barrier or make it more challenging for people to get into it. And all these little elements, I think, factor into the perceived prestige or giving cigars a bit of that mystical flair of it's not for everybody, it's reserved for a certain elite.
I see. And then looking at Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, is the cigar culture there similar? Is it more of a prestigious product? And what's the availability there? I have no idea, to be honest.
You know, in a lot of these markets, the cigar culture is ever evolving and growing, but it doesn't have the same history to it necessarily, or cigars haven't been as widespread as they are now. So with that culture growing and forming, it's still reserved in a lot of cases for an affluent or wealthier clientele. And I mean, especially in the Middle East, it's a very prestigious product. If you look at some of the lounges in the UAE, in Qatar, in Saudi, in Kuwait, these are gorgeous places, and that is certainly a more luxurious experience. Yeah. And cigars there are also a means of showing your wealth and your influence, your power, surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are equally important. And same in Southeast Asia. You also see that in terms of the products that these markets mostly consume, they're still very Cuban focused. It's still about showing off the Cohiba and the Behique band. So brands are very important. It's about, here I am, this is what I can afford, this is how I position myself and how I present myself by what I'm enjoying.
So then certainly price and availability is a determining factor, if it's being used or adopted by certain people. And that brings me to one of our last questions maybe here, which is the scarcity of the product. Now, certainly it can be scarce just because the importer only imported the most fancy, the most expensive cigars, and then certainly it will be a prestigious product because it's only affordable to a few. However, some cigars are sort of not available. And there's similarities in the wine industry. So do you see this artificial scarcity among cigars, things not being available because they're just not produced or they're being held back? Is that a topic in cigars?
Oh yeah, certainly. Maybe less widespread than in the spirits industry or in the wine industry. But certain brands and certain products you just can't get enough of. And consequently, these companies know how to play the game, and then you'll see a significant price increase. Habanos obviously has paved the way for prices skyrocketing and going to the moon. And for the last couple of years, the availability of certain Cuban cigars has dwindled and has become really, really challenging. Depending, of course, on the markets and where you're at, and there might be certain retailers where the availability is better compared to others. But whether or not people are artificially holding back product or trying to increase the demand or people's FOMO for certain products by decreasing the supply, you see that.
I see. Well, Reinhard, it's been a pleasure talking to you about prestigious cigars or not so prestigious.
Let me leave you and all the people watching with an important thought, please. Because, as I said, cigars are a luxury. But luxury can mean different things to different people. And when I say cigars are a luxury, it's because of the incredible amount of time, energy, passion, commitment that goes into creating every single one of these masterpieces. If you've ever been to a tobacco field, to a cigar factory, to an aging room, a retail shop where you truly have a curated cigar experience, you understand what's behind it, and you understand how incredibly complicated, complex, and challenging it is to create any cigar, every single cigar. And you can find some cigars in the humidor for $8, $9, $10, $12, $15, even $20. And that gives you 2 hours of peace and the opportunity to sit down with somebody and spending incredibly valuable quality time. What else could you possibly ask for in life?
I see.
So if that is how you define luxury, then I think your life is very rich, and there's so much in it in terms of value and weight and why. And I said it before and I will say it again. In today's day and age, it's so important to find these pockets and have an analog experience. What else could you ask for? And if that's what you call luxury, then I'm very happy with calling cigars a true luxury product.
I like that thought. And before we wrap it up, I want to introduce a little segment here that we talked about before the show, and we thought there's so many great books and things we like that it would be a great platform to just share some of those things that we come across. And we talked about books specifically earlier, and before we wrap it up, Reinhard, what book are you reading right now, and why did you bring it up earlier? And maybe for the audience, it'd be something they have on their shelf or they should have on their shelf.
Well, speaking about time and luxury, this is something that I learned speaking with influential people, successful people, people that I admire and look up to. They always have a ton of books around them. Whether you read a physical print copy, Kindle it, audiobook it, whatever. But I think there's a point to be made that smart, successful people usually are well-read. And I love asking the people around me for their book recommendations and what they're enjoying. And the one that I brought is actually one that was recommended to me by a very good friend who I every once in a while sit down with and have a cigar with. And he knows my background and that I'm all about diversity and variety and trying different things, having studied a lot of stuff and having taken different pathways in my career also. And so he said, this book is for you. And I bought it. I'm actually reading it for the second time, and I absolutely love it. It's Range by David Epstein.
How generalists triumph in a specialized world. Speaking about range, diversity.
And that hits it right on the head. And David Epstein, in this book, or for this book, was studying the world's most influential and successful athletes, artists, musicians, inventors, scientists, you name it. And with the book, he wanted to demonstrate why having a broad understanding of various different subjects and topics and skills and interests, you develop range, and it makes your life, your skill sets, your experience so broad and diverse that there's a lot of value in that to be gained for your life. And so this for me is an exceptional book, and I really like the concept.
Thank you for
Not
sharing.
only because it fits my personal approach very well.
Reinhard, time to wrap it up. I'd say to everyone, let's light them up, and hopefully we'll see you everyone in the next show.
Absolutely. Light them up. Thanks, Christian. Always a pleasure.